You guys are not gonna believe what Trump just tweeted. Sorry, try it again. You guys are not gonna believe what Trump... Jesus.
What's wrong?
Nothing, one more time. You guys are not gonna believe... You know what, never mind. Twitter's harassment problem is out of control, and it's changing the way we talk about free speech on the internet. Before we talk about what Twitter is, we should talk about what Twitter was supposed to be. In the preamble to its original rules, Twitter stated, each user is responsible for the content he or she provides. We do not actively monitor and will not censor user content except in limited circumstances. In other words, Twitter was supposed to be a neutral platform where you could say anything to anyone with very few rules.
Twitter and Blogger before it were very interested in kind of committing to that principle of free speech. If you get the barriers out of the way, speech will happen, rich discussion will happen, the best ideas will bubble forth.
That's Tarleton Gillespie, who's been studying speech on the internet since Napster was around.
What's Napster?
Am I old? Twitter prided itself on being an anti-censorship platform, especially after it played a role in the Arab Spring uprisings in 2011.
That was a very compelling idea for what Twitter could be, what citizen journalism could be. For a while, Twitter talked about themselves as the free speech wing of the free speech party.
Twitter's commitment to free speech was baked into its design and structure. You can tweet anonymously, meaning you won't be punished for your opinions. You can tweet at whoever you want, meaning you don't need permission to talk to politicians and celebrities. And maybe most importantly, beyond copyright infringement and impersonation, Twitter was not interested in monitoring what you tweeted.
That was a very powerful commitment for them and made them design their tool in really compelling ways.
Sorry, one second. Shut up, you stupid cuck. Nobody cares what you have to say. Kill yourself.
Jesus, someone tweeted that?
That's a text from my mom. Twitter began as a radical experiment in free speech, but over time, that experiment started to fall apart. Because the same features that made Twitter so attractive to citizen journalists and political dissidents also made it a perfect environment for trolls, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and misogynists. These users realized they could use Twitter's anonymity and structure to target and harass people they didn't agree with. And before long, Twitter had a massive PR problem on their hands. Every few weeks, another story about Twitter being overrun by abuse. High-profile users like journalists, celebrities, and authors leaving the platform because of Twitter's inability to deal with harassment. One of those users was Lindy West.
I am a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. I wrote a book called Shrill that came out in 2016. I'm just a general sort of internet feminist.
West loved Twitter at first, but over time, her work made her the target of brutal harassment campaigns.
Very quickly, my experience on Twitter became one of endless, constant harassment. I'll just read them. No need for you to worry about rape, Uggo. That big bitch is bitter that no one wants to rape her. What a fucking cunt. Kill yourself, you dumb bitch. Is that enough? Oh, there's so many more.
West recognized early on that harassment wasn't just mean, it had a purpose.
The goal is to make the platform uncomfortable enough that the targets don't want to use it anymore. They want you removed from the national conversation and removed from whatever little shred of power you've managed to achieve.
And Twitter realized it too. In 2015, former CEO Dick Costolo told employees, "We suck at dealing with abuse and trolls, and we've sucked at it for years. The rest of the world talks about it every day. We lose core user after core user by not addressing simple trolling issues." Twitter's radical free speech experiment had failed.
If you have a commitment to free speech and some of your users are being shouted down, threatened, and driven off the platform, something's happening to their speech.
The idea that you can be neutral without any moderation is an illusion, and it's a very lazy, self-serving illusion. If you allow hate speech to flourish on your platform, you are making a platform for hate speech, and that's not neutral.
Sorry. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. Everyone is secretly making fun of you.
Twitter again?
No, it's an alarm I set for myself. So this is where things start to get really dicey, because Twitter has to answer this basic but messy question. Is Twitter really a neutral service provider, like Verizon or Comcast, offering a semi-public platform without caring about what happens on it? Or had Twitter become something else, a community moderator that cares about the content and behavior of its users? So far, Twitter's answer has been, on one hand, the company is clearly moving away from its radical free speech roots. Twitter has slowly introduced tougher and tougher rules for dealing with harassment, prohibiting things like violent threats and incitements to harass. And in October, Twitter announced new rules to deal with violent groups and hateful images. Those are positive developments for victims of abuse, but enforcing those rules is making Twitter answer tougher and tougher questions about users' content. Is this harassment? What about this? What about now? Is this harassment? What about now? Is this an example of hate speech? What about this? Is this a violent threat? How about now? What about now? Is this a hate image? What about this? How about now? Is this a dangerous group? What about this? What about this? There's no neutral way to answer these questions.
The logistics are immense. The amount of accounts they're looking at, the kind of range they're looking at, how they judge what someone's doing, what their intent is, whether they're reading the situation correctly. Those are immensely difficult things to do.
Twitter won't say how it's going to make these calls. It's just asking us to trust them. And West worries those decisions might end up making the problem worse.
The waters really get muddied. I know Black activists whose accounts have been shut down for criticizing white people because it's racist. And we start to lose our grip on what we're actually talking about here.
At the same time, Twitter still wants to be treated like a neutral speech platform. In July, a month before the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Twitter rolled out a See Every Side ad campaign, celebrating its everything's cool approach to politics. Yep, that's a frat bro, Chadwick, I'm assuming, tweeting about climate change being fake. Sweet Chadwick. When current Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was asked what kind of tool Twitter is, Dorsey responded, "Twitter brings you closer." To what? Our users always finish that sentence for us. What does that mean? Closer to neo-Nazis? Closer to the targets of our harassment? Twitter is stuck between these competing visions of its responsibility to its users, which is how we end up with a website that bans white supremacist content but verifies actual white supremacists.
I don't envy Twitter. You know, it's a huge problem. It's very, very complicated. I don't know how to fix it.
Sorry. Wrap it up. Your voice is annoying and I'm hungry. Did you tweet this at me?
Wrap it up!
Fine, look. Any platform with rules has to have a reason for those rules, a goal those rules are trying to advance. Twitter doesn't right now. By starting to crack down on abuse, Twitter is kind of opening Pandora's box, opening itself up to more and more responsibility for what happens on its platform.
If you take the other view of free speech that says you have to make a venue where speech works, that requires having an aspiration. What are we doing here? What's the point of this? It's not just be more open and connected. It's not just talk to anyone you want to. It's actually, we're trying to build a conversation here. And if you don't look like you're building a conversation, then you don't belong here. That's a very hard kind of mental shift.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we're giving that much power to a private company, we better hope it knows what it's doing.